Where do people get information? What do people believe? How do they know to believe it? There's no secret exercise. There's no secret machine. If you're deconditioned and overweight, doing high intensity training is not going to help you lose weight in a safe, sustainable way.
So you work with some of the most affluent, well-known, talented people in the world, but you also have had the privilege of getting to write books and do major media. So you talk to a huge audience, and also, you have a huge social media account as well on Instagram. So what, from your vantage point, there's a disconnect, obviously. People in LA, super health conscious. Everybody's like doing what they can to make sure they're integrating the latest and greatest superfood, what have you. Right. But then you look statistically, and most of the country is not doing so well from a health standpoint. So what do you think, how can we bridge that divide?
Well, we live in a country that is driven by profit more than anything. So I remember when I was getting into fitness and I was reading all these magazines, I had this aha moment where I realized that every single fitness magazine was owned by a nutritional supplement company.
Wow.
Every one of them. There wasn't one that was not owned by a nutritional supplement company. So Weider owned Muscle and Fitness and Flex and one other one, and EAS owned Muscle Media, and Twin Labs owned another one, and ProLab owned another one. So everything I was reading was essentially an infomercial. Everything, every bit of information that I was like, I know everything about protein. Wait a minute. Oh, the company selling protein powder is telling me about protein. So I had that moment. The internet is that times a gazillion, where the majority of information that's on the internet today is coming from some agenda. And for the people out there trying to save the planet that are vegans, they have their agenda. And for the people out there that are in the beef industry, they have their agenda. And the people that are trying to push peas have their agenda. I mean, everyone has an agenda. And it's not that any of these agendas are bad or wrong, unless it specifically is hurting people or lying to people. But when you see a lot of the documentaries out today, like What the Health and those other ones, and people see that as like, that's what's really happening. No, that's one person's interpretation with an agenda that they want to communicate out there for you to change your mind from what you currently believe. So it's a weird time. Where do people get information? What do people believe? How do they know to believe it? Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, where do you get your information?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking before we got rolling. I go to like the primary literature. I tend to go to PubMed.
Yeah, but no one else does.
Right.
People don't even know what PubMed is. And for out there listening, PubMed is the National Library of Medicine's database.
Yeah.
So to be in there, it means that it is a primary bit of information. So it was a peer-reviewed article in a peer-reviewed journal that was vetted by a board that, it's far from perfect.
Yeah.
But it's as good as we have.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the most user-friendly experience. No. I'll say that. No. And not every paper is open access.
Nope.
So you have to find your way around paywalls if that's something that you want to, explore further. But I also think that there are some good resources out there that are written for lay audience. Like we were talking about this website, Healthline. I think it's called Healthline. Yeah. They're an evidence-based, website. And
but how do they stay around? Who pays for them to exist?
Yeah. I don't know.
Advertisers.
Yeah. Which doesn't necessarily invalidate a point of view, but.
No, but, I don't think certain advertisers are going to advertise if there's information there that is contradicting their claims about their product. So I think.
Right.
Nothing against Healthline, and maybe it's as good as it gets too, but I just take everything with a grain of salt today.
Yeah.
Documentaries are absolutely not where you should get any information. It's a form of entertainment.
Yeah. So where do your clients get their information from? Like, where do you
they blindly trust me.
Just from you?
And I have fun with it. I was like, you know what you need? Fruity Pebbles twice a day, Count Chocula, snacks. I guess that's why I've been able to stay in business as long as I have, because there's a certain trust they have with me. I'm not trying to sell them something. So even if I work with certain foods or brands or whatever it is, I've never endorsed a weight loss product or a cleanse or anything that, nothing against her, but Jillian Michaels would ever do. It's very different.
Yeah,
so,
of course. I very much appreciate that. Some of your clients, I mean, they're like on tours around the world. They're preparing for the latest, big blockbuster action movie. When a client presents to you actor, musician, whatever, and they've got to get in shape fast. Like, walk me through the process.
So depending on if they're trying to lose body fat or look gaunt, like, Jesus in the Passion had to look gaunt. Another client we worked with was playing a caveman, had to look gaunt. Someone else had to put on muscle mass. Putting on muscle mass takes way more time than losing weight. And also depends on what the person currently looks like and how long they currently look like that. So if they used to be an athlete and they kind of gained a bunch of weight, it's not so difficult to get them back to that. If this person's never had muscle mass on them, all of a sudden you're like, oh gosh, this is going to be a challenge. But if they're within striking distance, as fast as 5-6 weeks, you can make a tremendous difference.
Yeah. Because putting on muscle for somebody that's already at one point had a good bit of muscle, you benefit from what? Muscle memory, right?
Exactly. Or if there's someone who had a kid and gained weight from the pregnancy and I had to get them to lose it, it's different because they only had gained weight for 9 months or so. So getting them,
Nutritionally, I think there's this perhaps misconception that everybody in Hollywood, they go on these like crash diets. Is that an approach that you take? Like,
no.
Or is it a more sort of moderate?
When I started my business, an actor would come to me and they're like, I need to look a certain way by a certain date.
Yeah.
And I would shackle them to the elliptical or treadmill for an hour before our workouts 5 days a week and do these exhaustive long workouts and then keep them after for a cardio cool down and put them on a super strict diet. And it worked. And then after that scene was shot or after that month of scenes were being done shot, I wouldn't hear from that person for a year and a half.
Wow.
And things are different today because digital media exists 365 days a year. So if that person looks great and then has to go do some interview somewhere or someone's grocery shopping and sees them at 50 pounds heavier, they'll take a picture and post it and they lose an endorsement. And so today there's this need to be moderate, to have balance, to approach things with a real sustainable way.
Yeah. But like somebody coming to you wanting to put on muscle quickly, they just booked the latest Avengers movie. They got to pack on some meat. What are nutritionally and from an exercise standpoint, what are you prioritizing?
Both. Meaning they're both essential. It's like when you have a flower, do you need air or do you need water or sun? You need them all. So without one, it just won't work.
Right.
So if they're putting on muscle mass, I would do probably 4 to 5 days a week of resistance exercise, keeping their heart rate below a certain amount. The workouts will be slower, less about high intensity. The food is a massive part of it. I probably wouldn't have them doing too much cardiovascular activity. And it doesn't work for everybody. It's more important to look muscular on camera than be muscular.
Interesting.
So if you look at Jean-Claude Van Damme at any of his early movies, Bloodsport or any of those, I think he was 130 pounds or 140 pounds.
That's it?
Yeah. He's a little guy.
Wow.
So on camera, definition shows bigger muscles than bigger muscles without definition show on camera. So on camera, I don't look as muscular as someone 50 pounds lighter than me. And so proportion is another thing. So if you're out of whack and you're all anterior dominant, you don't look as good on camera as if you have a little more balance to your physique.
That's so interesting.
And I hate to say it, but most of these people, like Brad Pitt, his legs were like sticks back. When people talk about his physique back in the day, it was all upper. A lot of these guys are all upper body.
Dude, Brad Pitt's body in Fight Club, that was like the platonic ideal for like what I think many men,
and Troy,
including myself,
and Troy,
he got a little bigger for Troy, didn't he?
He did. He got bigger for Troy, but he's a little dude in
right, like in a t-shirt, he'd be like a skinny guy.
He's like a little dude. So I think if you take anyone who has some muscle, not even a lot, and you get them really lean, they appear really muscular. So that Bruce Lee, I think was 130 pounds.
Wow,
he was a tiny dude, but he could see every muscle flex when he moved.
I think there's this perception though that like people in Hollywood have some kind of like magic formula, but what's shocking about what you're saying is that it's not magic.
No,
it's just
motivation.
It's motivation, discipline.
Yep.
And the same tools that's what I think is so empowering here is that they're utilizing the same tools that we have access to.
100%. There's no secret exercise. There's no secret machine. they're using dumbbells and a bench and a TRX, and they're not using any special equipment. So if you
Wow.
read about it, it's not a thing, and they're not getting any special foods that you don't have access to. Um, so yeah, it's really attainable, and the workouts are not overly long because I mean, Hallie, the first book was called Five Factor Fitness because the workouts were 5 days a week. It was during her lunch, which only is 30 minutes long on a film set in Quebec. Um, we were shooting Gothica at the time, so it was on Montreal, and so she had to be back in her trailer in under 30 minutes. We had 25 minutes. So we did 5 minute cardio warm up and then a 5 minute upper body, 5 minute lower body, 5 minute abs, 5 minute cardio cool down, done.
Wow.
And that was how we transformed her.
So quick.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Speaking of exercises and anterior dominance, you on Instagram, you've taken a controversial stance on two exercises that I do pretty well. One of them I used to do pretty regularly, and then the other one I still do pretty regularly. Battle ropes and planks.
Mm-hmm.
You're not a fan.
You mean an isometric plank? You just stay there in the plank position?
Yeah.
Battle ropes, for sure not.
You're not a fan. I used to love battle ropes.
Yeah.
And then I kind of started to feel a little bit of what I read you say about them. But explain to my audience why battle ropes can be problematic.
Well, I always like to flip it back when someone's telling me they do an exercise and they love it. I'll say, rather than me telling you why you shouldn't do it, tell me why you should do it. What does that exercise do for you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought it was a great high intensity. It was like a fun and novel way of doing a little bit of anaerobic work at the end of my workouts, a little bit of like HIIT training.
Okay. So it's a way to get your heart rate up.
Yeah.
Okay. And how long at any one time would you do it for?
I would do it for 30 to 40 seconds all out. And I would do like 3 or 4 sets.
And do you think it's more lower body or upper body you're using?
I found that it was more upper body.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mainly upper body.
Yeah.
And of the body parts that are mainly being used, what do you think are being used the most?
Probably your core, your shoulders, your chest, your anterior deltoids.
But not chest.
You're not your chest.
No.
Huh.
Look,
Your arms.
Watch my neck.
Traps.
So you're doing a lot of things. You're putting a lot of force on your shoulders, on your levator scapula, on your trapezius, on all these things that you're lifting yourself up with. Your brachioradialis, your bicep, but not in a way where you're actually getting full extension, full contraction of anything. You're just sort of this partial tight.
Yeah.
Holding your breath. It's horrible. Look, if someone does it and it brings them joy and it doesn't hurt them, no one has to stop doing it. It's not, stop now or you're going to end up in the hospital at all. I just find that these exercises, really no one talked about them before Instagram. And I think there's a lot of exercises that I call fitness porn that you see on Instagram because they look great. So whenever I do a photo shoot for, whether it be Aloe or, some other company, they're always like, okay, we need to film this. We need movement in the shot.
Yeah,
can you use ropes? Because it photographs really well, which it does. The most effective exercises might not photograph well. Jogging in place, just not, it doesn't look very good.
Right.
So I'm not a big fan of that. Secondly, HIIT training, I think, is extraordinarily overdone. I think the research on HIIT training is sort of grasping for straws.
Interesting.
Keeping in mind who America is. The majority of America is deconditioned and overweight. HIIT training is the worst thing they should ever be doing.
Why is that?
If you're deconditioned and overweight, doing high intensity training is not going to help you lose weight in a safe, sustainable way. Number one, there's the rate of perceived exertion. Humans naturally avoid things that feel difficult. So if you can do something that, hey, that's not bad. I like that. That wasn't too bad. You'll do it more often and you'll do it more frequently and for longer. So it's got a high rate of perceived exertion. Secondly, things that are high intensity tend to have a higher injury occurrence. You're moving at a faster pace. Thirdly, your cardiovascular system is going to be the limiting factor in your ability to sustain, not the muscles you're trying to train. So I try and tell people there's two kinds of physical activity. There's steps or aerobic, and there's resistance training to strengthen, tone, and tighten your muscles and your connective tissue and your bones, your body. They're different. You can combine them, but it's the Swiss Army knife thing. The Swiss Army knife has a toothpick, but it sucks. And it has scissors, but it can't cut anything. So
Right.
even though it does a lot of things, it doesn't do either one incredibly well.
Right.
So I tell people, hit a step goal every day to burn calories and lose weight. Resistance train to tone, tighten, strengthen your body. Resistance training at such a high intensity where your heart rate is through the roof, you have general fatigue rather than local fatigue. I want people to focus more on local fatigue. I want it to be more precision. What's the least you need to do rather than how much you can do? And I think that's the miss on the approach.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. And
Again, don't stop. I mean, if people love hit training because it's cathartic and there's an endorphin rush that comes with doing super high intensity things and there's a stress release and there's so many other intangibles, but from a pure logical perspective on transforming your body, it's not the best way to go about it.
well, it is super intense, but I think the value add, what makes it compelling, at least from a research standpoint, is that, you know, imagine you're able to get the benefits of a 30-minute cardiovascular
Yep.
steady state workout in less time, right?
Yep.
In like a shortened, super high intensity set. So it might be more intense than that moderate intensity bout on the treadmill, but it requires less time. It requires 10 minutes as opposed to 30 minutes, or 5 minutes as opposed to 30 minutes. To me, I think that's like there's a value proposition there that
I was pulling up something. There was 3 new studies that just came out showing that hit training research was sort of reaching a bit.
interesting.
And so, people love to find new bits of information that can support or validate something that they're doing. Anything that supports a magic pill, getting more done in less time. People love that stuff.
Yeah.
So there was research showing, one set exercise, back in the day, Darden, that was a lot of his stuff that propelled Nautilus strength equipment. It was single set. And so if you did one set of exercise per body part, that's all you needed to do. And there's a lot of evidence showing that you can have benefits from it. But years later, we look back and we realize it's actually not muscular benefits, it's neurological benefits. So in the increase in strength you're getting is purely neurological, not really muscular. And secondly, you're not really changing the way your body looks. And thirdly, you're not any healthier for it.
Right.
So I think it's important to question this stuff. And again, if someone loves HIIT training and it's great, but what are you doing it for?
Yeah.
What's the number one reason that people exercise for?
Yeah. Probably to look better naked. There you go.
Yep.
Yeah. It's interesting. But battle ropes in particular, I thought it was interesting that you kind of called them out for the fact that it just puts more focus on this anterior. We spend so much of our time sitting and just doing things that are pulling our shoulders
Texting,
forward,
typing, driving.
typing. Yeah. And so you're doing this battle rope thing, which, I started to feel, because I have low back issues, like persistent. It's way better now than it's been. Shout out to boxing for really helping, get my lower back in shape. But that's just another sport, right? Where you're just like, your shoulders are coming forward.
I tell my clients never to box.
Never to box. Interesting.
Because it's all anterior.
Yeah.
Not only is it anterior, it's trunk rotation. If you have a bad back, you should avoid trunk rotation at any cost because your discs do this.
Yeah.
Thirdly, you're asymmetrical. So you always have if you're right-handed, your
Right.
left leading foot. So you're doing things for extended periods of time without balance. So you end up with a dominant posture. Fourthly, there's impact. And so impact over years causes arthritis. As a hockey player, I have arthritis in my hands from punching helmets.
Wow.
Again, don't stop it. If it brings you joy, and I tell people when I give advice, none of these are like stop right now.
Yeah. Well, I feel that boxing has helped, but I definitely appreciate. There was another post where you said that with your clients, you generally try to get them to sort of overcompensate for this anterior dominance by prioritizing back exercises. That's the first time I've ever heard anybody recommend that, to actually like.
I've never let a female client do push-ups, flies, bench press, dumbbell chest press.
Wow.
We hardly ever do biceps. Almost everything we do for my female clients specifically. Male clients, there's more of a desire to have a muscular chest. So we do chest, but for every bit of pecs we do 2 rhomboid movements. And for every bicep we do, maybe we do biceps once a month, but we do triceps every week.
Wow.
And for all of our quad work, we make sure we do 50% more hamstring and glute work.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Just because the front gets so much more work.
Yeah. And just if you never exercised before in your life, just by living life, you're going to be anterior dominant.
Hmm.
If you did exercise, you probably, when you started working out, I know when I started working out, it was bench press, bicep curls, and leg extensions
Yeah.
and crunches, right?
Pretty much.
And so everything's going forward. And so you look at embryological development, when an embryo is a bud, it's like this. And then we spend, the next several years kind of going like this. And then we get back to like this. And then we're like old people like this again. So we want to delay that and kind of go back to Da Vinci's The Eternal Man.
What are some of your favorite back exercises?
An inverted TRX row. I find a TRX allows you to really train your upper back with some intensity.
Are those are like the cables or
Yeah,
whatever?
like the yellow strap.
Yeah.
Reverse incline dumbbell row, single arm dumbbell row, reverse cable flies. And then, that all hits upper back, but then lots of glute work and hamstring work and tricep work. And yeah.
Is this also why you're not a fan of the plank?
I don't tell people not to plank,
Hmm.
but I think that I prefer an active plank.
Hmm.
So it's like when you train your biceps, do you just train them like this?
No, yeah.
When you train your triceps, do you train them like that?
You work them through the full range of motion.
So a plank is only strengthening your rectus abdominis at that one range of motion.
Hmm.
So I think that there's to have an active plank, like a pike plank or a spider plank or a twist plank or any other plank where there's actual movement and the abdominals kind of lengthen and shorten a little bit.
Yeah, I like that. I appreciate that. Man, so much good stuff. When I think another misconception that people might have about people in Hollywood, big movie stars, Grammy, platinum singers and the like, that they have some secret anti-aging, tonic at their disposal.
Some do. I mean, some take hormones, right? Not the people I work with, but I know of some people that take hormones. And I know in California, there are a lot of controversial and, in my mind, unethical physicians who are willing to prescribe hormones to people ad hoc.
Hmm.
So some do. You can generally tell which of your favorite actors are taking specifically growth hormone. You'll see over time their jaw widens. Sometimes their brow comes out. Their hands get a little gnarly and bigger, and knuckles, and
Wow.
they get an underbite, or their teeth start spreading apart. So,
And why do they take growth hormone? Is it just to allow them to? Because growth hormone is not anabolic to muscle; it's anabolic to connective tissue,
to everything. So
to
the difference
everything.
is when you take anabolic steroids, which is the sex hormone derivative testosterone that's mainly produced by your testicles. That's why men have bigger muscles than women, because for the most part, men have more testosterone than women. That helps with the recovery of muscles and therefore allows you to build bigger muscles. Growth hormone helps promote the growth and turnover of every cell of the body: your pancreas, your spleen, your bones, your ligaments, your eyeballs, everything. And the reason why growth hormone was originally used medically was if someone had what they call dwarfism. If you give it to them before puberty hits, it can actually help promote growth and drive them beyond where they were originally going to be, right?
Wow.
And then people started dying from it because they got Jakob Creutzfeldt disease. So then they were able to make it in a lab instead of taking it from a dead body. Now, when you take growth hormone as an adult, because your growth plates are sealed, your bones won't get longer. They'll just get thicker and denser. So your hands grow, your feet grow, your forehead grows, your jaw grows. And you get a condition called acromegaly. So if you look at, what's the motivational speaker, Anthony Robbins?
Tony Robbins, yeah.
So he has a genetic condition where he was born with an overactive pituitary gland. So you see him and his voice is deep and his jaw is big and his hands are massive. He was born with that condition. So that's why he's a huge person.
Yeah.
But if you take it as an adult, it makes every cell grow. If you have any genetic predisposition for cancer and you are taking medicine, and the definition of cancer is the uncontrollable growth of cells, and you're taking a drug, a hormone that aggressively tells your body to make more cells, you're most likely going to get cancer, get it sooner, get it more aggressively.
I have a good friend that has acromegaly,
Really?
and it's yeah, it's
How aggressive?
I mean, he's pretty aggressive. He's a pretty big person. Um,
How old?
looks older
Right.
than he is.
And most people with acromegaly don't live the full life term.
Yeah,
I hope he does though.
no, me too. Um, yeah, so you're not big on hormone, like what about at a certain age, like TRT?
So I think whenever you do one thing to the body hormonally or through drugs, everything else gets affected.
Hmm.
So everyone's like, "Oh no, I'm under the supervision of a doctor," and I'm like, "But that doctor has no one taught that doctor how to do what he's doing to you. It was
Right.
never part of their curriculum, and there is no research out there that they can even use. You're a guinea pig. So yeah, you're under the supervision of a doctor, and you're their guinea pig. Um, so it's funny. I had this conversation with my workout partner the other day, and he's around my age. He just turned 50, and I just said, "What's the age where we're just going to go all in? We're just going to take everything. We're going to take every little thing." And I made the joke. I'm like, at 85. He goes, "No, think about it. The way that lifespans are getting longer and longer and longer, as long as we don't do something dumb, we could live a lot longer than 85." So he's like, I'm in for 90. I don't know what the number is, but I think there'll be at some point in my life where the risk um, is exceeded by the reward, but it's not until I'm much older.
Do your clients have people that like? I mean, I'm sure they have people that are like making food for them
Yeah.
24/7,
Yep.
things like that. Um, that's got to be a perk when you get to work with somebody who has that and they're able to stick to the dietary recommendations that you make in a way that's
It
like
is.
really rigorous.
It is. It is. But I don't think it's necessary. So I think with a certain degree of success and wealth, you have options. You might not need those options, but it's nice having the luxury of having someone make your food.
Yeah.
But there's something about being connected to the food you eat if you prepare it yourself. You're connected to it. You know exactly what goes in it. You feel it. You're part of it. It's simple to do. Most of my cookbooks, they're all 5-minute recipes with 5 ingredients or less and 5 steps or less. So you can do it. Um, but I think when you're an actor on a film set and it's a minimum 12-hour shoot day, and it might be an hour to get to set, might be an hour to get home from set, and you leave the house at 6 in the morning and you're coming home at 10 o'clock at night, you probably would benefit from having someone prepare your food.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't, I mean, I love going to the supermarket and preparing food for myself. And I also love going out to eat, but I don't think I would ever get to a place where I wanted to relegate that aspect of
Me
my
too.
life.
Me too. And I go through waves. Do you think you'll have kids?
Yeah.
It's funny when you have kids, things change. You're just more tired and it's more about survival when they're really young. And as they get a little older, like, okay, they can go back to thriving again. So my kids are 5 and 7. And so now I have the time where I can cook for myself and not just for them. I'm getting back into cooking again, which is really exciting. Before I came here, I cooked.
Do you cook?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What kind of food?
I love breakfast food all day.
Mm,
All day.
huge fan, breakfast food.
All day.
What are some of your favorite breakfast foods?
I made this today before I came in. I made this. So I took these 4 ingredients: oats, egg whites, peanut butter, and banana. That has one of the essential amino acids, by the way, to complement that. And I put them in the bowl, all the ingredients, and I just quickly blended and mashed them all up. And I poured it in my skillet. And I made these pancakes. And then I just had them with berries.
Wow. Is that kind of a standard breakfast for you?
That was my lunch today.
Wow.
My breakfast was a scramble, 2 whole eggs, 3 whites, spinach, peppers, and some high fiber toast.
So you're not on a keto diet, obviously.
No.
I feel like there are a few celebs that have, publicly come out, big advocates for ketogenic dieting.
Yep.
What's your take on that?
They came out and then they went back in.
They came out.
So
They
it's
went
funny. I
back
had
in.
this conversation yesterday. A lot of them who swore by it.
Some of the big athletes, I don't know who they are because I don't follow sports, but like,
Yeah, I don't know. And research tells us it's a terrible diet for athletics because your carbohydrates is the preferred energy system for sports and athletics. And so
explosive power, things like
all
that.
that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so And again, research shows that keto can be helpful for short-term weight loss, but at the 12-month period of eating a traditional diet with carbohydrates or with the Mediterranean diet versus keto at the 12-month period, the weight loss actually went the other way. So
Hmm.
the people with keto sort of plateaued and started gaining weight, and the Mediterranean diet got better and better and better. And so anytime if someone says, don't eat carrots, don't eat red peppers, what the hell? No, apples are bad for you. That's not how we're meant to be. Dr. Atkins, may he rest in peace, was very heavyset when he passed. Um, I think that keto is not socially easy. I always say, when you have kids, would you want your kids to eat like that? And everyone's like, no, of course not. Well, then why would you want to eat like that? You end up with crazy breath. You've got methyl alcohol coming through your system. So your body's eating its own connective tissues and its own muscle and its fat as well. And
Yikes.
um, I think that it is an extreme diet. Anything is extreme. Cut out, carbohydrates for the most part. Uh, Beef fat with bacon and butter is a meal. I don't get it.
Yeah, well, I feel the same way as you. I mean, I'm a huge fan of plants in
Yeah.
general. Minimally processed whole plants.
Yeah.
I prioritize them. I would say that my plate generally is 50% protein. Like a properly raised source of animal protein,
Yeah.
if I can help it.
Yeah.
And then the rest is like grilled or roasted, asparagus, broccoli, a
Sure.
salad, what have you. Um,
But beets will kill you on Atkins or keto.
yeah, see, yeah. I love beets.
But there's a lot of great research recently on the health benefits of
I
beets,
know.
but not if you're on keto.
Chew beets, chew them slowly because the microbiota in your mouth, your oral microbiome, is essential in the process of turning the nitrates in beets to the nitric oxide that circulates in your
Oh, that's
blood
interesting. I didn't
vessels.
know
Yeah,
that.
so you want to slow down when you're chewing beets and greens, just generally any
Everything.
nitrate. Yeah.
Are you one of those guys who eats the meals really slowly?
No, I don't. I eat very fast.
Okay.
I eat very fast.
Because I have a friend, Pete Kuzma, who I don't eat with him anymore because it's crazy. We're all done. He's still going on his third bite.
It's kind of annoying when you're eating with people that are super slow
Because he
eaters.
read an article 20 years ago about that, slow eating.
I'm gonna call out my friend Crosby Taylor. He's a very slow eater, but that's why one of the many reasons why he looks the way he does. But very slow eater. He's almost painfully slow to eat with. But I'm like a dog when I eat. I'm like a Labrador.
Which is also why I like using a blender, because all the research showing that the pre-digestion aspect of putting foods in a blender, vegetables, etc., breaks them down in a way which makes their micronutrients more bioavailable to us.
Yeah, there are definitely certain plant compounds. Like I did a post recently on alliums.
Mhm.
There's a compound, almost like a defining compound of the category of produce called alliums, which include chives, leeks, scallions, onions, garlic, shallots. There's a compound called allicin that's created upon injury to the plant cells. It's a plant defense compound,
Right,
really,
right.
And so there's definitely some truth to that. Where if you chop these vegetables, or if you blend them, crush them, and let them sit for a little bit before you ingest them, or alternatively, you can just chew more slowly. But many people today just eat like I do, like really fast. That you're going to enhance the bioavailability of some of these
That's
really important
totally
bioactive
cool.
compounds. Yeah.
I can't eat alliums.
No, why not?
Genetically, my mom can't. Most of my family were missing whatever enzymes are needed. We are missing it. Like if any of us eat garlic or onions or chives, which I love the taste of, like we all love them, we are sick. It's the weirdest thing in the entire world. And we smell for 3-4 days.
No way.
Yeah. It's so weird. We can have a dish where you think there's no garlic in it. You can't even taste the garlic in it. I'll come home, and if I had it in the morning, let's say I have shakshuka, which I didn't have, but something in the morning, I'll come home at night. I'll walk in the front door. My wife will say, "What did you eat?" It's that sensitive. And there's a genetic Ashkenazi thing.
Is there?
Yep. Not everyone. It's a small, but yeah, I have a lot of family and friends, the same thing.
But you just like GI distress from eating alliums?
I don't know where it happens along the chain.
Yeah.
but somewhere like I can't break it down. And for the next 3-4
Wow.
days, I just burp.
Wow. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's sad too. I mean,
So sad.
it's got to make eating out so difficult.
Well, Japanese we love because it's easy.
Yeah.
There's not a lot, most Italian food is not heavy in garlic or onions. I mean, American garlic food is, but not. So I eat a lot of Japanese food. That's why I like breakfast food because there's usually not garlic or onions in
Because it's so
breakfast food.
simple. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. Protein, fiber. What's your stance on protein?
It's an essential macronutrient. It's good. I tell people to have protein approximately the mass of your hand
Hmm.
at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and something a third of your hand as a snack in between.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Very satiating.
Satiating, yes. Not as satiating as fiber.
Hmm.
Not as satiating as fiber and fat, and not as satiating as the three together. So I tell people every meal there should be protein, fiber, and healthy fat. And I call it the holy trinity of satiety.
The problem with eating fiber to satiety, though, is that if you eat too much, which is not always predictable, like where that threshold lies, it can make you miserable from a digestive standpoint,
It can constipate you.
or
and-
make you bloated, gassy.
Yeah. So depending on if it's water soluble versus insoluble,
Hmm.
you need a balance of both. I actually use Metamucil every day.
Morning or night?
I'm playing around with it. I used to take it at night just before bed,
Hmm.
wake up like clockwork, but now I'm doing it noon.
Hmm.
Yeah. I'm doing it noon. Just 1 tablespoon. That's it.
You do that for satiety, for the digestive benefits?
No,
for that?
just for motility.
Hmm.
Just as you get older, your motility changes.
Hmm.
And I think it started for me at about 40. It's not bad. It's just like I want to get ahead of it. It's like,
Of
how do I
course.
stay as regular as I did when I was in my 30s? And so I just have Metamucil, which I used to joke about.
It's also really good for lipids, actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which is
Super.
great.
Yep.
And we Ashkenazis, there's typically some genetic dyslipidemia that
We have the worst of every genetic. What are you talking about? Like we're inbred. We have every Tay-Sachs disease, type 1 diabetes. We have celiac, Crohn's.
we're intelligent.
We're smart. You think Crohn was a Taiwanese guy? No.
Maybe we're equipped with the genes and the intelligence so that we can figure it out. It's like,
Yeah.
that's sort of our task.
Yeah, we're great at accounting, tax law. We're great, medicine, but really medicine because we're learning on ourselves.
Yeah. So what's next for you? What's coming up? What are you
I
excited
mean, the
about?
training is something that I've done for many years. I did less of it for the last 10 years. My team did most of the training. Business stuff sort of took over most of my time. I fell in love with training again a couple of years ago. I've been doing more of it than I had, but it's still just a small part of my day. So I'm on the advisory board of a bunch of different companies and on the corporate board of some others. I'm the global director of fitness for Four Seasons Hotels. So I design their fitness amenities around the world. Create
That's
the brand
awesome.
standard. That's a lot of fun. I'm actually hosting a retreat at the Four Seasons Cabo this weekend.
Where was my invite?
So quarterly, this might not be too late.
Yeah.
Oh, it might not be too late. Let me find out. Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I've never been to Cabo.
Well, this is the best part of Cabo because Cabo, the beaches are not great. The Pacific Ocean, they're big waves. There's rocks. People, once a year, someone gets sucked in. But this is on the East Cape. So it's the Sea of Cortez. The water's like bath water.
Wow.
No waves. It's great. I work with Aloe, which is exciting. I develop fitness tools for them and content. Hyperice, Fitbit.
Hyperice is like the Normatec and
They have Normatec.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hypervolts, the guns, the Hypersphere, the ball.
What do those boots do for you? I love wearing them. They feel great.
It's about recovery.
Hmm.
And so, as we exercise, gravity takes hold and all of our blood and fluids and electrolyte, and metabolic byproducts kind of go down. We use our legs. Recovery takes longer sometimes with legs than other body parts because it's down here.
Is that why people's legs swell after a long flight, for example?
Exactly. Deep vein thrombosis is a possibility. So what it does is it has this peristaltic, like wave-like contractions that kind of squeeze your lower limbs, and it's like a lymphatic massage, if you will, and bring everything. You'll always see LeBron after his games with his legs up, wearing the Normatec boots, and a company called Form The first was the mirror and then tonal, now form. Very, very cool stuff. A company called that's about to come out that hasn't been named yet. Optimi, which is a mushroom company, psilocybin.
Oh man,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah,
You're interested in that space?
extraordinarily.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I'm fascinated by it. Did you read How to Change Your Mind?
Yes.
Michael Pollan.
Yeah, I had him on the podcast too.
Oh, is he great?
Around the time that it came out. Yeah, he's a very, very articulate, good storyteller.
Yeah. Oh, I love him.
Hmm.
He's great. Him and Anthony Bourdain were. It's like if I had my last dinner. Anthony, not now, but yeah.
Did you get to work with Anthony? Did you ever meet him?
No, I didn't. I was a huge fan. I got a very weird call um, to not replace him, but the production company that was working on him, they wanted me to do a show. And I was just so geeked. Like I think it was called zero point 0, the company.
Zero Point Zero Productions.
0.0,
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought maybe if I do the show, I'll meet Anthony or maybe I can work with him but huge fan. He impacted me big time to write the book, The World Diet. So it was 12, 13 years ago. I took a year off my practice and I traveled to the 10 healthiest countries in the world. And I wanted to understand, why are they living longer than us? What are they doing? There's no 24-hour fitness. There's no infomercials with thigh masters. There's no cleanse kits. Why are they living so much better and longer than we are? And I wanted to study their diets, their cooking techniques, their ingredients, how they burn their calories. And it was awesome.
What'd you find?
I found that they have very little in common other than these two things. Three things. The first is they all walk over 11,000 steps a day, including the elderly and children, whereas the average American was at 4,200 steps a day.
Wow.
So if you're moving 3 times more than someone else, you're going to look and live a lot longer and better than they do.
And even the elderly. So the elderly in the West, frail, moves around in just coddled, basically.
Yep.
And some people, obviously, not to sound like ableist or anything, but some people are not able to, are disabled, because disability is such a common part of what it means to age in this country.
Yep.
But not necessarily, I guess, is what you're.
No, I remember being
saying.
in the Italy part of the book, and I was in Positano, and there's a road, and then there's a set of stairs that looked like it went to nowhere up a mountain or something. And I saw this older gentleman go up, and he had grocery bags, and I watched the guy go, these are pretty big stairs. And the next day I went back, and I'm like, I wonder what's up there. So I started walking. An hour and 10 minutes later, I got to this little village called Nocella. I don't know how many thousands of steps I did. And I thought, that old dude, that's the only way up to the town. So you want groceries, you want something from down to the other town, you got to walk up there. There's no road, there was nothing. That's how you get up there. This guy's been doing this since he's a kid.
Wow.
And so, it was incredible. So that was the first part, the steps. The second was sugar. You go around the world, they don't eat sugar like we eat sugar. They don't put sugar in everything. We put sugar, as you know, in everything. And the third was carbohydrates. Everywhere else around the world eats more carbohydrates than we do.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. So Japan's the longest living country in the world, and they receive the majority of their calories from white rice. Same thing with Singapore, same thing with China, same thing with South Korea, same thing with the breads in Sweden, Finland, Norway, Iceland, Denmark, same thing with the Mediterranean countries. They eat carbohydrates because carbohydrates are not bad for you. Refined carbohydrates, sugar, not great.
Interesting. Yeah. What kind? So rice, breads, things like that.
And the kind of breads are different.
How are they different?
They're fermented. Here, when the war happened and they invented Wonder Bread, it was the first time where how do you speed up the fermentation process? You add this kind of yeast so that you put it an hour later, you can bake it. Whereas they used to ferment it for long, slow periods of time and put them away and just really let it work.
So bread was made exclusively in the past via fermentation.
Oh yeah.
Huh.
And this fermentation changes the characteristics of the starch, makes the nutrients more bioavailable. It's an amazing process. Again, Michael Pollan has this series on Netflix. One of them, he talks about bread making and how healthy bread was. You could live off of bread if that was your one staple, because it had protein, it had fiber, it had healthy fats, it had all these things. And it had all these nutrients in it. But today our bread is basically nutrient free. It's just made so quickly.
Fascinating.
So breads.
And also the fermenting bread like sourdough and the like, it also it pre-digests gluten.
Yes, exactly. This gluten sensitivity is more of a recent thing because of the way we make our bread.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. And everyone thinks they have a gluten allergy. I love that.
I would still wonder if they're whether or not they're healthy because of the carbs that they're consuming or in spite of the carbs that they're consuming. You know what I'm saying? Now, granted, they're moving a lot more, so I'm not saying that, but that's just like, I think, an interesting
Well,
question.
their diets can be compared to other places around the world that have lower carbohydrate diets, and those places don't do better.
Right.
So if you look at the Inuits and the Nunavits and a lot of the Eskimo tribes, Native Canadian tribes, where they basically live off of whale blubber and they live off of they go months without any carbohydrates really, and that really is keto. And you compare it also to certain places in the world where they're living off of other meats. And I want to say in certain African places, they live off of less carbohydrates. They eat carbohydrates, but a lot less. Lifespan is exponentially shorter, but for different reasons. So I think if someone has a recipe for success, though you might look at different components of that recipe and say, well, what happens if you took out that? I don't know what would happen. But
Yeah.
whatever they're doing is working really well, regardless of their ethnicity.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you. I think it's less the specific macronutrient makeup, particularly in regard to carbs and fat, less important than the overall quality of
Yep.
the subject's diet.
Yeah.
I mean, protein is obviously super important, essential. You need a small amount of essential fats, but then whatever, ratio of carbohydrates to fat you decide to fill in the gaps with in your diet around the protein and the
Yep.
fiber and all this stuff, um, inconsequential, so long as your diet is minimally processed, which is another commonality that I'm sure you saw in all
Yeah.
those places you
Oh,
visited.
and also people cook at home. I mean, we kind of invented fast food here. People eat out here more than they do at any of these other countries. People control their own food. They know what goes in it. They take their time to make it. There's love. There's process of going through it. So I think many times they grow the ingredients. So they eat seasonally. We don't eat seasonally here. I get blueberries 12 months a year here. I don't know about you. They're not great part of the year, but they eat seasonally. And I remember being in Italy one time, and I remember having I want to say it was a salad, and I said, "Can you put chickpeas in it?" And they're like, "Oh, they're not in season." It's like, wait, chickpeas have a season? I thought they come in a can and you drain them. Like, no, there's,
365 days a year.
but you forget about that, the
Yeah.
seasonality of food, right? So they focus on make your own food, make it local, make it seasonal, and make it.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed that conversation, you're going to love this one.
I knew about honey, but I didn't know the bees did anything beyond honey. And I used it, and it was the first time something worked. In about 5 days, I made a full recovery. And that was the start of my obsession with bee products. From there, I started incorporating all these different bee products into my routine, doing a ton of research. And then I became so obsessed that when I finished my time abroad and went back to college, I started beekeeping. And that's
Wow.
how I really got into all of this.
That's so exciting. Beekeeping, just based on your experience with propolis.
Yeah, I mean, it was really profound for me because I had been sick and I felt like I had tried everything. And for me to finally find something and, in a few days make a full recovery and then stop getting sick. I mean, I was in Europe for 7 months. And after solving that bout of tonsillitis, I didn't get it again, which was the longest stretch I'd ever gone in my life. And the only new addition was really propolis. And, I started using pollen and some other bee products as well. And I was doing so much research on it. And I realized that, propolis is known for being antiviral, antimicrobial, antifungal, anti inflammatory. So it makes sense that I had that effect. And I just became really obsessed with it. And then when I went back home, I couldn't really find propolis anywhere. In North America, there's tons of honey, tons of Manuka honey, but propolis just isn't really a household name. And so I was like, I need to get this for myself and I want to learn more. And I've had this really impactful experience. And I was like, I love nature. This could be a cool, weird hobby. And it ended up being my life's passion.
What do your friends and family think when you told them that you were going to become a beekeeper?
Oh, they thought I was insane. I was also, this is like in 2012, I was in college. And, I was like, it's not a normal after school hobby for a college kid, certainly not at that time. So they thought it was pretty weird. Um, and I sort of at that time had a dream of building a company around it and sharing it with the world, but I was graduating with negative funds, and I was fortunate to have a good job offer in finance out of school. And I was really encouraged to take that because it sounds insane to start a bee product company. So people thought it was like a cute, quirky hobby I was going to grow out of, I think, at that time. And I ended up going into finance and learned a lot. But, my heart is with this. Like, I never really cared about being in finance. And so then when I finally left to start this company, once again, I had everyone echo those kind of early concerns of like, is this a good decision? You should just stay put. But yeah, I mean, it was the best decision I ever made.
That's amazing. In those early days, were you harvesting all the different bee products from your own bees?
Yeah. So that's the kind of nice thing I like to share is that long before this was a company, long before I was like trying to sell anything, I was just making these things for myself. Like
Mm.
this is how I solved my health problems. And so there was no pressure. I was just experimenting for me. And so when I was a college student, I started as a beekeeper's apprentice. Literally, he taught me everything. And I was really fortunate as well to have a great mentor. His name's John. He was a retired biochemist from Romania who had moved to Canada to like be a recluse and write books. And
Wow.
at the time, I was a TA for my chemistry class. So I had this really cool kind of reference point for everything where I was going into the apiary and playing with the bees and harvesting and extracting, doing everything myself. And then I would bring it over to the lab and perfect, my version of perfection on like how to extract alcohol properly and like make the certain formula that I just like for myself. So it was a really great time to just be creative.
That's super interesting. Were you wearing a beekeeper like costume?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I had a situation one time actually where I was at cheerleading practice and in my bag I had my beekeeper's suit and someone pulled it out because they were just going through my bag to like grab something. And everyone was like, "Carly, are you going to murder someone? Like, what is happening?" Like, it's like to them, it looked like a hazmat suit. So
It looks like a fencing costume, doesn't it?
yeah, it's like a full head to toe white jumpsuit.
Yeah, and then there's like a
with
thing over your head.
with
Yeah,
a
so you could
veil.
like either be fencing on the side or you're like a beekeeper, which is super interesting. Sydney, my assistant, she turned me on to this TikTok account of this woman who like is a beekeeper also, but she does it completely without a suit. And I was
I
like,
know who you're talking about.
yeah, is that I'm generally not a fan of insects,
Mhm.
but I've warmed up to bees.
Yep.
People who follow me on Instagram will know that I recently actually tried to save a bee. I found a bee that was hurt and I tried to save it. I didn't know what I was
beautiful.
doing though. Yeah. And I don't think I succeeded, but I think there's a lot of confusion about bees and generally I would say that the sentiment is more of like one of fear,
Totally.
that bees are just out to hurt us. Is that not necessarily the case?
It is totally not the case. Bees are crucial to our life on this planet. So, bees pollinate 1/3 of our food supply. Without the bees, things couldn't grow. A lot of the natural foods that we eat that are so important for our health, we really would not be able to have access to them. Like it would become a food desert. And not to mention, bees pollinate over 40% of plants and flowers, and other creatures rely on them. So if you remove the bees, the entire ecosystem kind of falls apart.
Wow.
They're critical. And then in terms of the fear, I totally understand bees can sting and a sting will hurt, but bees don't actually want to sting humans. So when a bee stings you, it has these barbed things on its stinger and it latches into your skin and it pulls out the bee's abdomen. So the bee will actually die
Wow.
when they sting human skin. They can sting other creatures and survive, but for humans, they weren't really meant to sting us.
Interesting.
And it's really just something they do when they feel threatened. So I've gone in with my bees wearing like a tank top and jeans. I mean, if I'm like really getting in there, I typically will wear a full suit. But I mean, I've done it in like shorts and a t-shirt and that sort of thing. And if you're really calm, if they don't feel threatened, you're really calm, you're really gentle, you're not that likely to get stung.
Wow.
Mhm.
It's super interesting. How many times have you been stung over the course of your life? I'm just curious.
Oh my gosh, hundreds.
Hundreds.
Hundreds. But like I've done dumb things, like gone in to the apiary with sunscreen on that was scented that pissed them off. And like they're very sensitive to scent.
Hmm.
And I've spent so much time around bees. But given how much time I've spent around bees and how much time I've spent around bees handling things with no protection, no bee suit on, it's actually not that much when you think about it.
Wow. It is fascinating, though, what you said about how if you were to take bees off of the planet, that life would, I mean, as we know it, would cease
Hmm.
to exist.
Yeah.
But if you were to take, I mean, it just got me thinking, if you were to take humans off the planet, life would flourish.
I know. I know.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting. So currently, are bees, what are the primary threats
Hmm.
that bees face currently?
So the number one threat, in my opinion, and there's a lot of debate around this because pesticide companies tend to be well funded,
Hmm.
but the number one threat, in my opinion, is pesticides. So in 2006, DDT was taken out of the game. I think people probably remember the imagery of birds dying and all of that.
Silent Spring, Rachel Carson. She kind
Mhm.
of was the original whistleblower.
Yeah. And so when they took DDT out, it was replaced with a substance called neonicotinoids. And that is now it's very commonly used in the US. Now, other parts of the world don't, they've banned it actually. Parts of Europe have banned it. In Canada, they instituted a partial ban in certain provinces. So we know this stuff is bad, but in the US, as of now, it's still pretty widely used. And I really hope that changes. And, it's not good for us. It's a water soluble substance. It degrades our soil. But for the bees, it's a neuroactive substance and it really distorts their spatial reasoning and it's causing a ton of problems. And so, we've seen a decline in bee populations over the years, and pesticides are hugely problematic. And it's really interesting as well because at Beekeepers Naturals, we do pesticide free beekeeping.
Hmm.
So we make sure that there are no pesticides anywhere near our bees. And we do that for a few reasons. One, for product quality, of course, because organic, frankly, just isn't enough when it comes to bees, because just because your bees sit on organic land doesn't mean they can't fly next door, and they'll fly for like a 5 mile radius. So if they fly next door and the neighbors are doing something dirty, it can get into your end product. So you have to be really careful. So we do natural beekeeping, pesticide free. We're really intense about that. And what we've seen is our hives are flourishing year over year, contrary to population trends. So, I mean, that's not the largest sample and it's not a perfect study, but we're literally seeing our bees thrive without pesticides. And we also know, like there was a study that came out from Harvard, we know that these pesticides are harming the bees. So
Hmm.
that's the number one culprit. Other factors: urbanization, climate change. Um, a big thing is monocropping. Just the agricultural practices have really changed. So if you think about it, you know, let's like think about it like a monocrop. It's one type of plant and it has one bloom period. So there's a certain time of year where the bees have this awesome buffet. And then after that bloom, it's kind of a desert.
Hmm.
So unless they're planting other, margin planting is a really great practice for people who do have monocrops, to allow for for varied foliage around the perimeters so that bees have different food.
And monocropping, just for people who are not super familiar with that term, it's a completely unnatural process, right? It's just like human intervention will grow certain crops that are seasonal, and
Yep.
then when they are not in season, that it's just dead.
Yeah.
It's like it's like a ecological dead
It's
zone.
a dead zone. Yeah. I mean, if you think like economically, it makes a lot of sense because we have like our dedicated almond growers and our blueberry growers and people who specialize in these different things, and they can, maximize the yield. But it's not how things used to be. It's not, you know, varied wildlife and different plant types. And it's just, one organized type of plant.
Hmm. Very interesting. Do bees have any natural predators other than us, perhaps?
Wasps will
Wow.
go at bees. Wasps are really scary because they can sting and sting without dying, whereas bees die. So wasps actually give bees a bad rap.
Is
But
there anything good about wasps, or are they
I
just
mean, they're
evil?
pollinators too.
Oh, they
So
are.
I've had my bees terrorized by wasps at times, so I'm not a fan, but like I appreciate and respect them as pollinators of this planet.
Are you generally cool with like insects?
Oh yeah, I'm like a bug girl.
You are. That's
Yeah.
so interesting. I am very like squeamish when it comes to bugs, especially roaches, water bugs, things like that. I grew up in New York City.
Mhm.
If I saw a water bug on the sidewalk, I would literally cross to the other side of the street.
My partner will literally call me into the room to like take a spider
Wow.
outside.
I don't know. I feel like we have these like innate fears, some of us,
Mhm.
it's super interesting. So you've brought to the market all these incredible products. And as you mentioned, I think most people are just familiar with like honey.
Mhm.
One of my favorite bee products, and has been for a long time, is bee pollen. How do you, I mean, like bees, they're just like this untapped reservoir of amazing things. Like it started for you with propolis, and
Mhm.
then like walk me through the process as you began to discover all these other um, products that bees were creating.
Yeah. So, I mean, I first fell in love with propolis. And again, like many of us, zero awareness of what the word propolis meant. Like, I really just thought that bees make honey. And it's really interesting because bees are actually not native to North America. They were brought over by European settlers. So,
Mm.
in other parts of the world, propolis, royal jelly, pollen, commonly used in traditional medicine in certain parts of the world. But in North America, we really only think of bees for honey, or depending on what industry you're in, pollination. Um, and so my first experience with propolis, I mean, I was just sick and it was literally the first time something worked. And then as I started to research it, I found, I just went on PubMed and was like looking up propolis, tons of studies, tons of science. And then it was really interesting because I realized like this isn't new. I was like, what is this new magic I stumbled upon? And of course, it is very old. The first recorded human use of propolis dates back to 300 BC.
Wow.
And, in the 17th century, propolis was listed in the London Pharmacopoeia as an official drug. So this is, before this is like what we've been using as medicine for a very, very long time. So propolis was really, the gateway for the gateway drug for me.
And where do you find, like, how do bees make that? Where is it? How is it harvested?
Great question. So everyone thinks that every bee product is a honey derivative. Not at all. So I'll
Hmm.
do a little Beehive 101.
Yeah,
So
please.
I'll start with honey because we all know it. So honey comes from flowers. Bees will go from flower to flower. They have this long tube-like tongue and they suck up the nectar from the flower, carry it back to the hive in their honey stomach, which is like essentially they have two stomachs. One's for digestion, the other is basically a nectar backpack.
Whoa.
They bring it back to the hive, they basically allow it to ferment. They get all the water out and it becomes the sticky substance that we know and love as honey. And the bees use that as their food. That's their carbs, their energy source. For humans, uh, it's a healthy sweetener. It's full of antioxidants. Honey has antiviral effects as well. It actually has a calming effect on the body. A lot of people will take honey before bed, and then it also helps people to sleep through the night because for people, it helps to balance the glycogen stores in the liver. So if you're a person who wakes up in the middle of the night, a teaspoon of honey before bed can actually be really supportive. So that's honey. And then propolis, while honey is the bee's food, you can think of propolis as the bee's medicine.
Hmm.
So honey comes from flowers, propolis comes from trees or plant and tree resins. So think of like sap as the base ingredient. So the bees will go, they'll collect the sap and the plant and tree resins. And these are the literal immune materials of the plant as well. So you can just kind of see how propolis is more of a medicinal substance than honey. They combine it with their enzymes and they make this sticky amber colored substance called propolis. And they use it to line the hive and keep it germ free. So propolis is the bee's immune system. It's the protective barrier between them and the outer world. They'll even line the inside of the cell walls for newborn baby bees to create a sterile environment. And they have a propolis mat at the front of the hive so everyone
What?
can disinfect. Bees are very smart.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And then propolis, it's like, OG medicine. It's, what you can use to support your overall immune health. It's really something that people can use every day to support their body, protect themselves, bolster their natural defenses. It's also really high in antioxidants. It's anti-inflammatory. There's tons of benefits. A lot of people use it for allergies as well because it's so potent as an anti-inflammatory substance. But that's propolis.
Now,
And
when it comes to propolis, because I know you guys have this incredible spray. And side note, I take like regular like voice singing lessons, and
Mhm.
my teacher, shout out to Deborah Joy, she just randomly, she didn't know that we were seeing each other later today, but she said that this is a great spray for people who have sore throats, if you're a singer, if you're a
Mhm.
public speaker. So she was a big fan of this, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. So my question is it, for best practices, like you use it topically, you spray it on the area? Is it something that you want to ingest and have like,
Mhm.
systemically?
I tell people 3 to 5 sprays in your mouth every single day.
Hmm.
If you are doing, here's the thing. Health is integral to everything. And there are so many things we do to prioritize it, which is amazing. But if your immune system is not functioning properly, nothing's working. Like you really do want to take the steps to care for your immune system to build up your body naturally. And so 3 to 5 sprays of propolis in the mouth every single day. It's like, your bodyguard in a bottle. You're just bolstering your natural defenses. So that's what I do. People who sing we have so many singers, podcasters, actors, people who use their voice professionally and really rely on it and get the inflammation from working it so much will often take more than that.
Hmm.
But I really believe that everyone should be using propolis every day. I think we can sidestep a lot of different illness and just really, feel a lot better. It's radically changed my immune system. I mean, I haven't had tonsillitis since 2012, which is
Wow.
insane, and I still have my tonsils
And you were struggling with it chronically beforehand.
chronically. I mean, I would miss like 3 weeks of school at a time as a kid, like always sick, always sick.
Wow. So interesting.
I know.
I mean, I love that you found something that works for you. When I spray this in the back of my head, it's just it's tasty, but it's so soothing as well. I can see how it could definitely be like a life raft after a long day of, vocal performance or
Mhm.
speaking or what have you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like everyday immune health. It's just what you do every day to support your immune system. And the bees are onto something. And again, like we found propolis in Egyptian tombs. Like this is not new. It works very well with the human body. Humans have been using it forever. And the base ingredient is the immune components of the plant as well. So it's got, it's like the plant's immune system, the bee's immune system, and it works really well with ours.
Wow, so interesting. And there is, I mean, because I've definitely done a PubMed search of propolis. There's a good amount of there's like, there have been clinical trials, there have been like research reviews. People are definitely within the scientific community talking about this substance,
Oh,
but it's
absolutely.
probably just not nearly as well funded as a pharmaceutical agent. And so you're not going to see the kinds of robust, multi-center trials that you're going to see with a drug candidate, but
Totally.
that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not doing something.
For a natural substance that doesn't have, big pharma money funding studies, it actually is a remarkable amount of research.
Hmm.
It was really interesting. During COVID, we saw a huge spike in interest just for propolis because a lot of doctors that have a presence online, a lot of health professionals were talking about propolis as an ingredient to support and protect your immune system. So more and more people are starting to understand propolis and search for it and look for it and understand what it is as an ingredient. But we're still really in the early days of sharing it in North America.
It's great. Well, Europe is so ahead of the curve in so many ways, that it's so great that you were able to find it, and now make it available to everybody in the way that you have. So we've talked about honey, we've talked about propolis. Royal jelly is something that I first heard about when I was a kid, like years ago, and I've never known what it does or why people like to use it, or I don't even know. Yeah, what is it? What's royal jelly?
So royal jelly. So again, honey is the bee's food. Propolis is the bee's medicine. Royal jelly you can kind of think of as the brain food of the hive. So royal jelly, the nurse bees make it, and a lot of people compare it to like colostrum. So for all newborn baby bees, for the first 3 days of development, they're given royal jelly. It's like breast milk.
Wow.
And then after 3 days, the bees transition off of royal jelly onto a more normal bee diet of honey and pollen. And only the bee who's to become a queen continues with her exclusive royal jelly diet. So that is all the queen is eating.
Is that why it's called royal jelly?
Yeah, it's the queen's food.
It's like bee breast milk.
Yeah.
That bees
Royal
don't-
jelly has more of a ring,
I was going to ask a really stupid question to be funny, but I'm not going to go there. So royal jelly.
Yeah. So
Tell me
royal
about
jelly.
its properties.
So it's the exclusive food of the queen bee. Really interesting because if you just look at the queen bee on a biological level, the queen bee she evolves very differently than regular bees. And, I think her royal jelly diet plays a big part in that. So the queen bee is much more robust. If you just Google queen bee versus like regular worker bee, she's jacked, like she's fit.
Wow.
The queen bee will lay around 1,500 babies a day, whereas regular female worker bees don't have reproductive organs. The queen bee will live 3 to 5 years, whereas a regular worker bee during foraging season lives 6 to 8 weeks. They literally work their ass off until
So
they die.
worker bees don't reproduce.
No, they don't. It's
The
the
queen bee
queen who
makes
does it
them all.
all.
Wow,
Yep.
that is fascinating. And
Mhm.
also, what I've learned is that worker bees are primarily they're all for
All
the most part
women.
female.
All women. The
Well,
women do everything in the hive.
see, bees also they have this beautiful women's empowerment story to them as well because they're doing so many good things for the world, and they're mostly women.
Yeah. The male bees, they're called drones.
Women, I could probably get in trouble for that. Not that I care, but we'll say that they're female.
Yeah.
More
But the
more accurate.
male bees are called drones, and their sole purpose in life is reproduction.
Hmm.
Like they basically mate with the queen. They die during this process. The queen will take her like mating flight, have sex in the air with a drone, and he dies.
Oh man.
Yeah. Goes out good, goes out strong. And then once the queen has basically once she's pregnant and when it's sort of like approaching fall, the male bees are all kicked out of the hive. The girls are like, "Hey, you guys are a drain on resources. You're gonna need to go." And they just, overwinter like that. So the male bees don't do much.
I had no idea that bees were such feminists.
They are.
I love it. I love it. Hey,
Yeah.
Sometimes I see huge bees flying around.
Mhm.
Are those
Those are bumblebees.
Those are
probably.
Oh, so there's a difference between between a worker bee and a bumblebee?
So there's a bunch of different bee species. So honeybees are the ones that we work with at Beekeepers Naturals. Honeybees are the ones that are making the honey. They're the most effective pollinator, but there are tons of different bee species that are great pollinators too. So the big fuzzy ones, those are bumblebees.
Yeah, they're slow and cumbersome and
They're really cute.
they
I
terrify
find them
me.
cute.
They terrify me. Glad you find them cute. So those are bumblebees.
Those are bumblebees. Yeah. So yeah, there's a bunch of different types of bees. Um, bumblebees are, so generally speaking, like solitary bees, bumblebees are actually social as well, but solitary bees, there's some bee species that really live on their own. They don't live in like a hive community and they're really unlikely to sting you. There are even stingless bees. Like there's tons of different types of bees all over the world. So yeah, honeybees though, they are the world's most effective pollinators. So they're again, all bees are super amazing at pollination, but honeybees are just like efficient.
Wow. So we've talked about propolis.
Mhm.
We've talked about honey.
I should tell you what royal jelly does for humans, though, because it's amazing for bees, but it has some really cool properties that affect humans and specifically affect the brain.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, you mentioned that it was like a brain food. So what does it do to the human?
Yeah.
Brain.
So royal jelly is really well known for focus, memory, concentration. It contains acetylcholine. It's one of the only naturally occurring sources. So acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter basically responsible for brain-body connection. It helps to speed up your transmission system. And then this is like a really cool thing that I like to nerd out on. Royal jelly contains these two fatty acids called 10-HDA and AMP-N1 oxide. And these basically promote BDNF. They act as a catalyst for neurogenesis. So they're really, I see a lot of people using royal jelly after a concussion, or with any sort of brain trauma. I use royal jelly on a daily basis. We have these like Be Smart brain shots that I think you've tried. I take those every day, and that's just what I do for focus, memory, concentration. I also try to stay off caffeine, and royal jelly gives you like a nice little energy boost. But royal jelly is really powerful for pretty much supporting your executive functioning.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, the Belix are like capsules that you guys make.
Mhm.
Very interesting. I know there's a lot of people interested in nootropic. Would you consider it a nootropic substance?
Absolutely. Yeah. Our Be Smart shots are definitely nootropics. And so we have the royal jelly in there. And then we have ginkgo biloba, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners know about. And then Bacopa monnieri, it's also an adaptogen. It's an extract from a leaf traditionally used in Ayurvedic medicine that has great properties for the brain as well.
Amazing. So bee pollen, where does bee pollen fit into all this?
Pollen is also one of my favorites. And I'm really sorry because I brought you bee pollen and left it in my Uber, but I'm going to get you more.
Bee pollen is actually like of all of them, I would say probably my favorite. I eat this stuff by the fistful.
It's so good for you.
Well before even you got started with Beekeepers Naturals, I was a huge fan of it. It's so good. It's how would you describe the taste? It's like fruity.
Yeah, it depends on the time of year it's harvested and the floral sources. I'm like so good with my bee pollen now that I kind of know what flowers it's coming from. Not always, but sometimes. But bee pollen, you can really think of it. So for the bees, carrying on with our theme here, for the bees, it's their protein source.
Hmm.
So literally the bees will go flower to flower, collect the pollen, they mix it with their enzymes, so they kind of like bunch it up, and then they stick it on their hind legs, and it's called their pollen pants. So like if you see a picture of a bee with these like yellow balls on their hind legs, that's their pollen pants, and they're carrying it back to the hive like that.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it's the bee's protein. So that's what bee pollen is. It's literally the protein source for the bees. The bees eat it. And for humans, I like to think of bee pollen as nature's multivitamin. It is just one of the most nourishing substances. It's full of broad spectrum vitamins, minerals. It's actually got more protein per weight than any animal source. That's per weight. So it's
Hmm.
not that heavy, but it's a really complete food. And so it's something that I take every single day. And I do it for energy boosting, but I really just do it to cover my bases nutritionally because it's so bioavailable and it's just such a potent source of vitamins and minerals.
And it's an actual food. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
a supplement. Next to
Hmm.
honey, it's like the other food that is produced by bees. How do you integrate
Absolutely.
bee pollen into your diet? Do you
I
do
put
you do
it
it like me, like you just shovel it into your mouth, or
So after I work out, it depends what I've done actually. If I'm going to do something that's really intense cardio, I'll take it before because it actually increases your endurance. I'll just like have a spoon of it or like throw back a pollen shot. I sometimes take it after I work out just for recovery. But I'll put it on my smoothie. I put bee pollen on like everything. I sprinkle it on my avocado toast. Anything that you would put like chia seeds or hemp seeds or cacao nibs, anything like that on, I use bee pollen. I even put it on ice cream. I'll like make an ice cream sundae and sprinkle bee pollen on top of it.
that sounds fire. I mean, I put it on the ice creams that I make in my Vitamix. Like I'll just like
Hmm.
blend up some frozen berries and whey protein, which by the way, for any of you guys listening, you can make a really simple ice cream doing this. You just get frozen berries. I like to get a mixed bag of organic berries from like Sprouts or whatever. And you throw like a little bit of almond milk unsweetened and then 2 scoops of protein powder. You blend it up and you mash it down with a tamper and you get this ice cream. And then after that, I love to sprinkle some bee pollen on top. It's so good.
That sounds really good.
Yeah, it's tasty.
That's the thing though that I love about all bee products from propolis to pollen to you name it. They're like food grade, they're very bioavailable because I have such an issue with, not all supplements are taken in by the body the way we want them to be. A lot of things we just don't really break down and we titrate and pee out, the $40 supplement we're spending money on. And so bee products, they're really well integrated by your system.
Couldn't agree more. Sometimes I get bee pollen that's really soft, and then other
Mhm.
times I get it and it's really firm. Is there a difference in the chemical constituents that account for that variation?
So there's a few things that could be making a difference. One is the floral type it's coming from. There's just, natural variance in the type of pollen. But the other thing is a lot of pollen and all pollen's great. So, just take your pollen, everyone. But unless you have very severe allergies, in that case, I would be careful because it's pollen from the plant. So,
Right.
you know, um, a lot of pollen is dried.
Hmm.
So people will harvest it, they'll apply a lot of heat, they'll dry it out, and then they sell it and it can be a little bit crunchier. So something that we do is all of our pollen's raw. And, even dried pollen is incredibly nutritionally dense. But I like to keep ours raw because pollen has, like all bee products, really powerful enzymes. Like how the bee is collecting the pollen and how they're bunching it together and transferring it, otherwise it would be a powder, is by mixing it with their enzymes. And bee enzymes are magic. So for the pollen at Beekeepers Naturals, it's completely raw. And that's why we recommend like once you open it, it's totally fine before you open it. And if you've opened it already, it's not bad. It's just ideal to keep in the fridge or freezer after you've opened it. Now, when I travel, like I did a road trip this summer, my pollen was sitting in a hot car and I ate it every day. It gets really hot in the hive, so it's not like your pollen's going to go bad, but it is great to preserve the enzymes that way. But sometimes the harder pollen, it's because they've applied a lot of heat and dried it out.
Interesting, but it doesn't degrade the healthy health qualities of
I
it.
mean, it will degrade the enzymes for sure.
Hmm.
Anytime you're applying a high heat like that, and like heat as in, so sometimes the reason people will apply heat to pollen sometimes is to clean it.
Hmm.
For
Like, is
us,
that like pasteurization or?
sort of, you can think of it that way just because little things like, sticks, leaves, when you harvest pollen, there's stuff that gets into it. Like how you harvest pollen is you put this basket kind of under an area of the hive and the pollen that the bees basically drop, we collect and
Oh
take that.
wow.
And so there's, people have different methods, but that's what we do. But with that, you get leaves, you'll get like twigs, that sort of thing. And so some people will use a really high heat to clean it. What we do is we use air. So we basically have this huge machine where we like fan it. And so we basically blow out, and it's sort of like a mesh catcher. We blow out anything that's bigger than the pollen granules.
That's so cool. It's definitely one of those things. Like I have to have it in my fridge, and on Greek yogurt, I'll put it in. It's even good on salads, like in salad dressing. It's got a really strong flavor,
Yeah.
so I don't use a lot in salads, but definitely people should check it out. It feels decadent too. I mean, I just like, yeah, I go to town on that
It's so
stuff.
funny. When I first started beekeeping, the first time I tried pollen, I was like, no, this is like way too earthy for me. I don't like this taste. And now my body craves it
Yeah, I love
like
it.
all the time.
It's awesome. I want to go back to honey a little bit because it's obviously the most common of the products produced by bees, and there are a bunch of different kinds of honey on the market. So maybe you can help us make sense of all that, right? Like you mentioned, I think earlier, Manuka.
Yeah.
What are the different honey types, and what should people be looking for?
Yeah. So Manuka honey, it's a specific type of honey that comes from the Manuka plant. It's native to New Zealand. The Manuka plant's really similar to eucalyptus. So eucalyptus honey would have similar properties.
So Manuka honey doesn't come from a specific type of bee.
No, it's a specific type of plant.
Got it.
But Manuka got really famous because New Zealand ran studies on it. And they found that Manuka has antiviral capabilities. Now, Manuka is really expensive. And I think that our local honey would have those same antiviral capabilities, but we just haven't done the same studies. We know for sure that propolis is a stronger antiviral source than any honey. Like there's no honey that's going to be a lot of raw honeys have traces of propolis in them, and that's part of their magic. But propolis specifically, like that's really what you want for immune driven things. And it's going to be much more potent than honey. But as you said, there's a lot of different honey varietals. So when you're looking for honey, so Manuka is great, but do you need to spend a crazy amount of money for like the name Manuka? No, like any raw, good quality honey is going to get you there. Now, a study was done and it found that the darker the honey, the higher the antioxidants. So buckwheat honey, which is comes from the buckwheat plant. That one has a very earthy flavor. It's not like the sort of like light sweet honey, but it's also got a dark, rich color, kind of molasses looking. That has the highest antioxidants. And really interesting, there was a study that was looking at buckwheat honey compared to a substance called dextromethorphan. And dextro is it's the active ingredient in most cough syrup. So like Robitussin, whatever you would buy at CVS, the traditional cough syrup, typically has dextro in it. And the study was done comparing buckwheat honey to dextro. And it was looking specifically at upper pediatric respiratory infections, so kids with respiratory infections.
Wow.
And it found that buckwheat honey was just as effective.
Wow.
And so when that study came out, I was like, oh my gosh, why would you give a kid or adult dextro and like the sugar cough syrups when buckwheat honey is literally just as effective? So that's why we made our cough syrup.
Wow, that's amazing. So the darker the honey,
Yeah.
generally,
Darker,
the more antioxidants.
the more antioxidants. The key things to look for raw, because if you're buying pasteurized honey, and pasteurized honey just means it's been heated to a really high degree. It's like the type of honey that typically comes out of that squeezy bear is pasteurized. If it's really liquidy, it's probably been pasteurized unless it was like just harvested. And so you do not want that because that's sugar water. Pasteurized honey, you've cooked all the nutrients out. You've applied a really high heat. So, you're losing all those antioxidants and all the nutritional properties. So the raw honey is what you want. So always make sure you have that. Now, raw honey will solidify. So sometimes I have people say like, oh, my honey went bad. And I'm like, well, that's impossible because honey is the only food on the planet that never expires. Like they've found honey in Egyptian tombs that's like totally nutritionally intact. And that's a testament to bees' enzymes. It's pretty cool. So yeah, your honey, like it never expires.
That's
not
so interesting.
possible. Yeah. So if your honey's getting hard, it's just crystallizing, which is a natural process. And that's why people pasteurize honey to avoid crystallization because it's more user-friendly. Squeezes out of a tube. If it pasteurizes, it's harder. You have to kind of heat it up a little bit to soften it. So yeah, but crystallization is a totally natural process. If your honey crystallizes, that's fine. Still eat it. If you want it to be softer, what you can do is heat up some water, stick the jar of honey into the boiling water. You're not going to pasteurize it doing that. You have to work at it to pasteurize it. And that's how you can soften it. But the key thing is look for raw honey And do your best to look for a honey that's pesticide free and organic. What we were talking about earlier, organic does not necessarily mean pesticide free, unfortunately.
That's
Um,
a big misconception that I
yeah,
think needs to be dispelled. However, organic does indicate typically that there's no
lower.
there's also they don't use legally they can't use synthetic pesticides,
Mhm,
but organic they still have organic approved pesticides.
totally.
But I would feel a lot safer. I know that there's like people are listening and be like nature fallacy, like natural doesn't necessarily mean safer, but
Mhm.
when it comes to herbicides, pesticides, and things like that, they use like vitamin D as a natural pesticide, an organic approved pesticide.
Totally. So I wasn't even first of all, organic is, definitely safer. And for me with my produce, I make a real concerted effort to purchase organic produce because I just don't want to the synthetic pesticides, I just don't want to support that
Mhm.
generally. Um, but with bee products, even organic pesticides, it doesn't necessarily mean pesticide free. Because remember, the bees will forage for a 5 mile radius. So that's why, like
Interesting.
at Beekeepers, our apiaries are in the middle of nowhere. We do a ton of work in Canada because it's a massive landmass with a tiny population. So like we have bees in the Rockies. Like our bees are really in the middle of nowhere. And there are definitely places in the US where you can get pesticide free and where or the organic pesticides aren't surrounded by like the gross pesticides, but it's getting harder and harder in the US.
Wow. What about the packaging? Does that matter? Because when you were talking about the plastic bear bottle with the honey, I was thinking, okay, they're pasteurizing this honey, they're heating it up, and then they're putting it probably straight afterwards into this plastic container that, hot liquid plastic container. To me, that's a recipe for exposure to plasticizing compounds.
Yeah, I mean, I'm big on anything that's super hot. I don't want it near plastic. I
Yeah.
haven't seen any research specifically on that relating to honey, but I've seen we know that hot plastic is a bad situation. Now, we have never first of all, we don't pasteurize honey at all at my company. I've actually no, I think one time when I was an apprentice, I pasteurized honey for someone, but I've never pasteurized honey. I mean, I haven't in a long time, and I've certainly never pasteurized it and poured it into anything but glass. So I've never even experimented with that. But I would just avoid the squeezy bear honey if it's pasteurized. Like if you're having honey that's pasteurized and you think you're getting any health benefits, you're not. It's sugar water.
Yeah, super interesting. Speaking of the carbs in honey, it's primarily fructose, right? Have you
Mhm.
done like a
Yeah, and so it's also really interesting. People think that all bee products are high sugar. And like, yes, of course, honey has sugar in it. It doesn't spike you in the same way that, regular sugar would or certain types of sweeteners do. But propolis and our Be Smart as well, those are sugar free. I mean, first of all, there's no added sugar, but there's no added sugar in any of our products, but there's 0 grams of sugar. So we have people who are in ketosis who use propolis and Be Smart all the time. I tell those people like, pollen might kick you out, honey will kick you out, but go for it with the Be Immune propolis spray and the Be Smart shots.
It's, I mean, it really, the dose ultimately is what determines whether or not something is keto or not. There's like
Yeah.
this dogma in the keto space, I mean, like a teaspoon of sugar can be keto.
Yeah.
A cup of white rice can be keto if you're exercising vigorously. I mean, it's like they're carbs,
Mhm.
so they're sort of counterproductive to ketone generation, ketone production. But if if that's all you're consuming in a day, are you going to be kicked out of ketosis for any significant duration? No. So when people get that obsessive, I think it can be counterproductive and a little obsessive.
Totally agree. And such a big thing is like using honey, even people who are in ketosis, like using honey for sleep, a little bit of honey. If you're not having good sleep,
I know.
then what are you doing?
You're opening the door to so many different health
Yeah.
problems. So interesting. So what's next for Beekeepers Naturals? I mean, you guys have all these incredible products. You're at every major supermarket that I've seen. I always look out for you guys. What's on the horizon for you? What are you excited about?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm really excited about a product that we just came out with. I don't know if you've ever taken Halls or Ricola before, but we just came out with lozenges that
Amazing.
are really, really clean. I'll give you some to try. I think you have some actually, but I'm really excited about those. They've got zinc, vitamin D, propolis, and just a really clean ingredient profile. a gram of sugar per lozenge, 8 calories per lozenge. And, it's interesting when you look at lozenges. I like nerd out so hard on this because it literally took me like 3 years to make these lozenges because every hard candy manufacturer I went to was like, we need to use cane sugar as a binding agent or maltodextrin or aspartame. And I was like, well, we don't work with those ingredients. So no. But that's a product that we just launched. And then beyond that, we're really looking to reinvent the medicine cabinet and, clean up the medicine cabinet, things like our cough syrup, and then also just share the different powerful nutritive foods from the beehive and really make them mainstream. Like again, these are tools that everyone should be using. They're tools that humans have had in the toolkit for thousands of years, and we just really want to bring it back and bring it forward and give people a modern way to incorporate bee products into their life and have, the best experience they can.
I love it. How can people support bees?
Great question. So, big thing is pesticides. Really get to know what's happening on your lawn. I know a lot of people. So I was talking to someone the other day in LA who was a gardener, and they were telling me it's organic. And then they had this conversation with their gardener, and there's a lot of pesticides being used. So check out what's happening on your lawn. Go pesticide free. A great thing to do to support bees, and I do this in New York on my balcony. Just plant some local flowers, like any
Mm.
kind of bright colored flowers. Make sure they're pesticide free. One of the things affecting bees is pesticides, of course, but the other is urbanization. There's not plentiful food for the bees. So if you can create a little bee habitat just by planting some organic flowers, great. Another thing is do your best to support small scale biodynamic pesticide free growers because, again, these are people who are creating food for the bees. And then we do a ton of stuff through the company. So we make like all of our swag, we give 100% of proceeds to our charity partners. We work really closely with UC Davis Bee Research. They're an unbelievable research institution. Check them out. You can also donate directly to them through Beekeepers. But they're doing all kinds of research just on how we can better support the bees and learn more about the integral roles bees play.
And bee products. Do they do any research on the bee products themselves?
They do. Yeah, they do. Recently, they're really focused on just because of the bee decline, how we can support bees overall. But we've done all kinds of stuff with them.
Wow, that's amazing. I feel like people are going to be, a little bit trepidatious. Like they're going to, want to plant flowers on their balconies or whatever, but
They're
then
scared of bees coming.
but then they're going to have more bees around. So
here's the thing. Unless you're really getting in the bee's face, swatting at it, it's unlikely that it stings you. I mean, again, like I've like gone into the hive, like put my hand inside their house, which is like, and that will be kind of in their face. But if you're outside in the garden, there's a few bees flying around, unless you're like really swatting at them or, wearing a ton of perfume or something that's really triggering, they're not going to come after you. They'll probably just help your flowers grow really beautifully.
yeah, I think people these days have an affinity for bees. I feel like there's been really great, this incredible shift over the past couple of decades. People are still afraid of spiders. People are definitely still afraid of like roaches and pests and things like that.
Yeah.
But bees, there is this sort of really benevolent, I think, morale that people have about bees.
Well, yeah, I think people are starting to understand that if we lose the bees, we are destroying the environment. Like we really do need the bees, and especially with the decline. I mean, can you imagine a world? Well, first of all, like the inflation on natural food. If we can't, everything's bee pollinated: almonds, apples, avocados, blueberries. If we can't use bees to pollinate, like what are we going to do? Humans are going to hand pollinate with Q-tips. A blueberry would cost like $50,
Oh my God, yeah.
So it's really important just to preserve our food system, our natural food supply, then fruits and vegetables, that we support the bees.
Hey, if you like that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.
Kind of spontaneously and accidentally into an emerging technology called membrane separation. Membrane separation involves a word most of your listeners probably have heard of called reverse osmosis. It's one of the subcategories. And what's unique about it and why it got the world's attention is because it can separate membrane people don't know what a membrane is, but for now, think about a piece of saran wrap, okay? A membrane that separates. If you push water up against the membrane, it separates everything from water.